I want to talk about probably one of the most fundamental experiences I'll ever have in my development as a human being. Um, was when I was about 7 years old. We had traveled up the hill, up the road, between the many acres between us of farmland in order to travel to what was my grandma and grandpa's house at the time. My last grandfather only died this year. My other grandpa died when I was, I want to say about 9. But yeah, this specific grandpa I'm going to be talking about was still alive at the time. We traveled up there, and we all knew that my grandma was most likely going to die. She had been in really bad medical condition with cancer at the time. The cancer had just been sort of seeping through her as the days went by. It seemed like she was less able to talk, like the thoughts that she was making were less coherent. Um, she was in rough shape. She began forgetting things over time. She actually told my mom, I remember this, she told my mom that she essentially was like one of the good kids that she had, that everyone else who came to see her only wanted to come to get stuff out of the house. They didn't want to talk to her. They didn't want to spend time with her or have conversations with her. They just wanted to take things out of the house. Um, and it was a sort of moment of honesty for her because I remember she withheld a lot of information for the sake of not hurting other people, and my mom could attest to this too. She didn't say, she often did not say what she was feeling. Sometimes it would come out. Sometimes, sometimes what she was feeling would come out, but it would shock her. She'd put her hand over her mouth and go, I wasn't supposed to say that. Um, she was always trying to kind of hide it in order to help other people or to be a positive influence to them. I cared about my grandma a lot. She made me quite happy when I was spending time with her. She was a kind person, principled person, a very principled person. Um, but as the moments leading up to her death occurred, and I knew those were moments leading up to her death, my family did nothing but reassure me that it was going to happen eventually. I was told time and time again to be prepared for the event when it did ultimately transpire. Um, and we went up to the house. A lot of them were just dressed in black. A lot of them, were ready for what was about to happen. And I remember just sitting there in the last moments of her being alive, um, as she just sort of mouthed the last words that she could. I don't even remember what they were. They were kind of incoherent. Um, Watching her just lay in that bed and then slowly drift away from existence. And everyone knew when it did happen. Everyone knew when it was over. Um, Entire family was there. She just died in that hospital bed, sort of put together in the middle of this house. Um, and everyone was crying. Everyone was just in fits of tears and tears in this place. And I think I cried a little bit. Um, I kind of it was funny. I sat down trying to play with the blocks when everyone else was around, and I remember someone told me it wasn't time to play with blocks. I was literally trying to escape out of the situation as it was occurring. So that it was I believe it was about 40 or so minutes after she had passed. I was sitting there trying to play with the blocks, and then I remember uh, other people were taking things out of the closet to try and get things out of the closet now that she was gone. We can inherit her stuff. They were trying to get things out of the closet, and I was just kind of sitting there playing with what was left. Um, but I didn't cry very much. I didn't feel very sad. Um, and I remember when we all walked out of the house. Well, not all of us. Some people were still in, some people were upstairs, some people were down, but I walked out of the house. And a bunch of my cousins were sort of congregating in the front yard. They were just around. Um, and they were crying a lot. They were in, a fit of just emotional pain. It was all over the place. And I made the mistake of saying something to the effect of, "It's good that she's dead now," which is not what I meant. What I meant to say, I said it's good she's dead now because she's in a better place, essentially. She's more at peace. But I didn't communicate that. I didn't know how to communicate with the intention of showing that I was talking about peace instead of like the fact that she died was good. That's not what I meant. Is not at all what I meant. But this cousin, this cousin that I said this to, with everyone else looking around her, looking at me, she said, "What did you say?" Just looked at me with this like suspicious air. "What did you just say?" Um, and then I called her the nickname that I had for her at the time, the nickname that I continually called her whenever we went up to this big house, because all of the cousins at the time, we all went up to this big house that my grandma and my grandpa had, and people would just go there. There'd be lots of family members coming in and out of the house all the time, but I would go up there alone with my brother sometimes. Sometimes my family was there, but I would call her this nickname, and I attempted to call her that. Uh, and I just said it, and I was gonna say I was sorry, but she just said, "Don't call me that. Don't call me that." She was too upset, and I didn't really understand why at the time, because in my mind, I knew something was wrong, so I didn't want to say any more. But in my mind, what I said made total sense. You know, I said, "It's better that she's gone now because she doesn't have to experience pain anymore, and she's more at peace." And it seemed to just not emotionally phase me the way it did for everyone else. I remember when we got home, I had a conversation with my dad at the time. He told me, when you die, you're just at peace. When you die, you just die. It's just the thing that everyone happens. Your consciousness either ceases to function or some kind of metaphysical stuff happens where, you have a bit of consciousness before you're gone. And then, after a while, it just sort of fades away. And he was talking about this specifically in the context of the NDE that he had had when he was a kid, when he tried to drown himself. Um, and he was just sort of trying to comfort me, give me some kind of solace in the idea that when you go, it's not so bad. It's just something everyone does. And that just made sense to me at the time. It didn't seem scary. It didn't seem like something I was supposed to fear. It just seemed like the end of consciousness. It just ceased to function. Um, and I wasn't able to emote the way that everyone else was. Um, as time went on, it seemed like I detached more and more from each person who died. Now, when my grandpa died on my dad's side, strictly what I'm talking about here is people on my mom's side when I talk about the grandma, but when my grandpa died on my dad's side, I cried and cried and cried. I cried way more. Don't know why. Maybe it was because I was older at the time, that I had a more firm grasp on what was happening, that someone who I loved really was gone. Um, I kept crying, and then over time, more and more family members died. More and more pets died. More and more famous people who I looked up to, cared about, were inspired by died. And I just didn't care. I just ceased the ability to care because the way that I would continually deal with this loss is that I would tell myself, well, they're more peaceful now. There's no need to worry. When at peace, you don't have to worry because there's nothing to worry about. There's no consciousness to tell you to worry in the first place. Everyone's going to. I may be upset now, but when ultimately the death happens to me, I'm not going to have to deal with this either. I'm not going to have to deal with these worldly feelings, nor do they. So what's the point of being upset about it if it's just inevitable? Um, and ever since then, I haven't cared. It was those very, very early experiences of having this explained to me and not really reacting the same way that everyone else did, that I that specific experience with her, the way that I was not able to react the way that everyone else did. Even kids who were younger than me reacted in a more strong way than I did. I just felt like I kind of existed there. It didn't hit me. It wasn't able to hit me in the same way that it did for everyone else. I kind of detached to it philosophically the more that I thought about, well, okay, it really is just a matter of time, you know? My grandpa died. It was more of a feeling of regret almost that I didn't get to talk to him more. There were things I wanted to tell him. There were things that I regretted doing around him. It was guilt on my part that led me to being really upset about that because there were things that I did that made him angry that I thought about and I thought, well, I wish I could have undone that. I wish. I wish I never did that, that I explained myself better, that he saw me in a different way before he died. I didn't want to seem like someone he didn't like. My parents reassured me that he did care. He did love me like he loved everybody else, but it never felt like it never felt like I had the time to be accepted, to have to explain myself or to seem like someone who was worthy of praise in the first place, that I had made too many mistakes, that I had been yelled at too many times, and I just desperately wanted to seem like someone who, he cared about or treated positively. And when he died, that was a much bigger punch to the gut than the fact that he was gone itself. I feel like if I had made peace with those things, or if those things just simply never happened, I wouldn't have felt the same way. I probably wouldn't have cried nearly as much, if at all. Um, when I was younger, I fixated a lot on how I was viewed by other people. And when they would die, it always felt like I never got them to view me the way that I wanted them to. It was like I had never explained myself well enough, or I had never kept out of trouble well enough to be loved the way I wanted to be loved. Then by the time they were gone, I couldn't do that anymore. I had lost my chance. Um, but people passing, like over time as I got older and I stopped having those regrets and I stopped feeling guilt the same way, eventually I just stopped feeling guilt entirely. Like eventually I was just completely unable to feel any sense of remorse. Um, the time where this was the most prevalent, I think, was at about 11 years old, where I really started just developing this ability to completely detach. I mean, when I was younger than that, I would kill my neighbor's chickens or steal from my family members without really caring. I did a lot of really bad things without really caring. I would constantly bully one of my cousins who was the same age as me. I would call her names, treat her terribly. I would just, I emotionally, verbally speaking, I just take the shit out of her. I'd be so mean constantly to her. And all she ever wanted to do was just be nice to me. All she ever wanted to do was just be my friend. And I just continually, again and again, just treated her like shit. And it was as if I enjoyed doing it in a way. And there was a part of me that didn't. It was always that conflict between the part of me that liked doing it and the part of me that didn't want to. That was always what was really confusing at that age. Then as I did worse and worse things, or worse and worse things happened to me, I was just completely unable to care. I just did things for the sake of doing them. I did things regardless of the moral or emotional implications of them, because none existed in my case. Um, and I would say it really all came to a head when I was about 11, that I was pretty almost entirely detached when I was 11. When I was 13 is what I meant to say. When I was 13, that's when it all just like, it was the never going back moment where I was completely unable. Because at 11, I already had developed this habit of constantly putting on masks, constantly lying to other people. And I had done that when I was younger, but at least I felt a semblance of remorse or guilt for it. By 11, I just did not give a fuck. I just did whatever I wanted with no consequences at all. If there was a way I could get out of something creatively, I would. If there was a way I could lie my way out of anything, I would. Um, and when I turned 13, and I sort of developed this kind of fascination with gore, with watching people die, when I went on the deep web. When I went on the deep web for the first time when I was 13, and I observed some fairly gruesome, horrendous things. Um, I wanted to see more of it. At the first point, I was a bit shocked. I had to deal with it in an empathetic way. I was a bit upset when I saw some of these horrible things. There was a bit of a physical reaction almost. But over time, I continued looking at it and looking at it and looking at it, and I just couldn't stop. I just wanted to see more of it. Then eventually, I developed this feeling of wanting to do those things. And of course, I had had those thoughts previously. Um, I had been a pretty loud and violent kid at certain times, and I thought a lot about violence when I was younger. But when I was looking at these really horrendous murders, it just kind of it all put it in my head in a way that had never been there before, you know. Um, and I developed a fascination with it. As time went on, I only continued down that path. I got into a lot of relationships later. Later, I got into a lot of relationships, you know, online or not, in which I was very, very manipulative as a person. I mean, when I was in school, I would constantly just manipulate people for my own gain, steal, lie, cheat, you know, the whole shebang. Um, you know, the gang's all here. But one thing that I specifically did in seventh specifically was that I would constantly get into fights all the time, fighting all the time. I loved the rush of seeing people bleed, of knowing that my fists and my actions caused someone pain. I wanted to do more of it because I enjoyed it so much. Um, I loved I loved going up behind people, blowing up these bags of air, you know, these plastic bags of air, and then popping them, just popping them behind someone's head so that I could hear their reaction and I could see their faces. I could see them buckle their knees as their plans fail, you know. To quote Hisoka Moro, a fucking legend. But like, you know, I wanted to see people suffer. I really did, especially my enemies, especially people who I had a personal grudge against, which now at this point I'm so detached that I don't even have personal grudges against people. I don't even have desires for revenge or, you know, to hurt anyone for having hurt me because I just don't care anymore. I've exceeded the ability to care so much that I don't even care to the extent of hurting people who have hurt me. That they're just kind of reactions that existed in the void at one point, things that I'm so far detached from at this point that I'm unable to feel them in the same way. Where like, you know, before I would be vengeful. If someone hurt me, if someone got my eye, I wanted to jab out both of theirs, you know, essentially. And I loved it. I really, really loved it at the time. I wanted to be more violent. If I had the chance to kill someone at this time, I certainly would have. It's not a joke. I would constantly think about it, and you know, I would think about all these different ways that I could try and get my teachers fired. One of the big ones was, you know, I would make up stuff that my teacher had did. I would make up stuff my teacher had said, and then I would get them in trouble with basically with the principal's office to just fuck with their career. And I really enjoyed watching their reactions to it because they knew what I was saying was 100% fake, and I just wanted to fuck with them. You know, I loved, you know, trying to just go around and be be someone who reels you in with this positive facade, with this positive persona that, you know, oh, this is a nice guy, and then yanking the chain away from you when you least expect it. The act of of trying to form these kind of manipulations in my head, these social manipulations of people, trying to find their weaknesses and then to exploit those weaknesses as much as I could. It was like a rush for me. I loved doing it. Um, and I developed these tendencies more and more. I was in some relationships with people in which I tried to exert as much control as I possibly could, even if it meant developing an entire persona, even if it meant pretending to be an entirely different person. I wanted to exert as much control over the people that I was with as I could. I wouldn't do that now, so I think you shouldn't do stuff like that. it goes against the systems that I've created for myself, but that was what I was doing at the time. Um, and it was pretty bad. Not gonna lie, it was pretty bad stuff. I still feel no guilt, no emotional guilt, no remorse whatsoever. I wouldn't do it again, but I don't care. Uh, yeah, I liked it a lot at the time. Um, yeah, sort of as time went on, you know, that experience when I was pretty young, it just sort of detached everything. And I mean, like, the abuse that I had from my brother at a younger age sort of just caused me to detach as much as I could. And just other really horrible traumatic experiences I had at a pretty young age. It's kind of led me to detaching more and more. But I think the relationship with death is interesting because I think it was one of the, you can have the relationships with death that I have, and not be like, to the level that I am of detachment or to the level that I am of antisocial behavior. But like, I think that was one of the beginning. I think that was one of the beginnings of this sort of development in my personality. Um, and I think it's interesting to look back on just because I didn't react the same way everyone else did. I have these little experiences that I think a lot about. These little experiences that I kind of apply a lot of significance to that I think most people would kind of brush over. Um, but yeah, when I after I was 13, started doing really really bad stuff. And I mean, when I was 12, I started doing really bad stuff too. Like when I was in fifth grade, man, I was constantly just saying shit about people. I was constantly saying like I literally said I wanted to rape someone when I was in school. Literally said that because I wanted to. It's not a joke. It's not a goof, that's not a gaff, that's not me being more extreme than I am. Literally wanted to. At 12 and a half, can you believe this? At 12 and a half, I came up with in-depth plans on how I would drug someone and rape them. When I was in sixth grade, I only expanded on these ideas. Um, I became really, really obsessed with this one girl on my bus. And we had a lot of arguments with each other over time. We started out as friends because I started learning what she liked, and I just kind of did what she liked and I sort of manipulated her friend to encourage her to date me. I was just really like nice on my face to her, and I complimented her a lot, and I did a lot of niceties to try and get this person to be on my side, to be my friend. I listened to them a lot. I looked at the things that they wanted, and I gave them those things. And then what I did was I had this person continually each day try to convince this girl to want to be with me. Eventually it worked. And I've told this story before in the video. Um, what was it? It was the video I Was Desperate for Human Connections, where I explained the way that I severed this connection and fucked everything up was by vaping on a bus. And she saw me basically vaping, is that I showed it to her. And she basically stopped having a crush on me and stopped wanting anything to do with me because she thought that was bad. That was like morally bad to vape or something. Um, and so yeah, like so 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 I almost got with this girl, but there started after this happened, there just erupted more and more arguments between us, constant arguing. And you know, I just had this thought like, man, oh man, I could just rape this person. I know where their house is. I see them get off the bus every day. Um, and I was I came up with all of these like I did a lot of research on drugs that I could use, for instance, and I started researching all of these different date rape drugs. I was in sixth grade at the time, uh, and I kept considering like if I got on a bike to go to her house really late at night, what kind of security would she have? How would I be able to make it to where my tracks aren't traceable? How would I be able to make it to where my tracks aren't traceable, to where she would not know, the police would not be able to tell that I was there? How would I be able to leave as few fingerprints and DNA there as possible, and to be able to know what kind of security system they have and what kind of, what the structure of their house is essentially. And I came up with the plan using the other friend that was on the bus, one of the other ones, um, using basically him as the catalyst to get there, of developing a really good friendship with him and then being able to mend my friendship with her because they were both friends, to be able to go to her house at some point. The plan was to be able to go to her house at some point by using this person to sort of create a better social standing to have with her. And then to basically map out what the structure of the house was and to get an understanding of what kind of security they have in order to break in and use these drugs to rape her. I thought very in depth about this. I wrote in depth plans on how I was going to do this. I just never did because I thought it took too much effort and there was too much of a risk involved. But I would have done it. It's not even a joke. Not a joke. I just would have done it. That's the thing. I literally did not care. I cared zero. Zero fucks given. None. Absolutely none. And like, it's good. It's good that someone like me can have systems to reel them in, to keep them from actually doing shit like this. Because if I did not have those, I would be chaos. My existence would be chaos otherwise. Um, oh boy. Yeah, like, I think there was another experience I wanted to talk about. Is that I had a best friend. I had a best friend who I basically manipulated his girlfriend into cheating on my best friend with me just because I enjoyed the rush. I enjoyed the rush of being able to just fuck with this guy. To be able to like have this woman as a trophy without him even knowing. I loved it. I loved the idea of cheating behind his back, of her cheating behind his back. She was not even that attractive. I was not even that interested in her. I just wanted the power that would come from that. Um, there's a lot of instances like this I can cite throughout time, but this video, the intention of it wasn't meant to be like a journal of all of the psychopathic behavior I've exhibited over the years. Um, it was more so to talk about one specific event. You know how I am. I ramble on and on when it comes to these things, and then I end up just getting to topics that are aside of the point. I thought of telling that rape story as its own video because it was a really specific part. It was a really specific part of my life that looking back is really funny. That as a sixth grader, I developed this entire fucking plan. I was gonna do it too. I knew how to buy the drugs that I was gonna use. What the hell, man? Oh my god. I was a terrible human being. Um, I'm glad I don't do those things anymore, I guess.